I recognize the member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish the member for St. Joseph would have made the statements of of reaching out and of working together and so on 3 years ago when we were pleading for that. And the word tone was used on several occasions. I myself used it many times. And the business of using the Parliament as a collaborative opportunity in order to get things done in the interest of the nation, we raised on several occasions. And in the last bill that we debated here, I don't think that friendliness was apparent. And I don't think that the member for St. Joseph and his colleagues opposite should keep raising the issue of being unpatriotic just because you take a different position or you articulate a strong view. And it's not sensationalist to talk about what's happening in this society and how it's impacting on people, which is what the member for Couva South did. So I would say that the tone that you want to establish now, I mean, you're asking for it. It is reasonable, but perhaps it's a little too late. And secondly, I think that given the nature of this crime issue, I mean, it is a big issue. People are dying every day. Some of them have died in my own constituency without solution of the crimes. And the report itself talks about the escalation that is taking place. And I want to go to the report now. I think on page 16.
Faster than you, huh? First part of the report. Faster than you. Record time.
On page 16, maybe to make a point or two. Now, I want to say that the report makes a fairly realistic assessment of our situation. On page 15, item 217, it reads, unfortunately, our Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, TTPS, has retained an unfavorable reputation for being understaffed, underfunded, unstable, publicly undermined, archaic, and unprofessional. Crime in Trinidad and Tobago is steadily rising, and while from time to time there are downturns, looking back over the past decade, crime and the fear of crime have rocketed. Any reduction in crime or the fear of crime in the last 5 years has proven to be a short-term cycle within a long-term worsening trend instead of a reversal of the trend itself. And we have known that over the last 2 years especially, we've really been breaking records. We may end up with 550 murders at the end of the year this year. Lawbreakers, I continue on page 16, seem to be emboldened with the notion that there is a good chance of escaping punishment for criminal activity. The public seems to share the notion, and generally there seems to be a low public confidence in the central law enforcement agency and the criminal justice system on the whole. An unremittingly low crime detection rate and a less than desirable prosecution rate has reinforced this mistrust. So this is what we are dealing with in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is what the Police Manpower Audit Committee, which is the report that was referred to the Joint Select Committee and which is being reported on here after due deliberation by the JSC. This is what that report talked about. It talked about the troubled state of the police service, and it talked about the police service being in a wounded state. And it also talked about the human condition, human resources, and attitudes affecting the TTPS. And when you look at the short list of issues which the JSC puts before us on page 3, the issue of public confidence and trust is mentioned twice. Now, I'm sure it's a typo, but the fact that that was a typo, I think, tells us something about how important this particular issue is. This issue of public confidence and trust in the police service. I think that when you look at just a few pages of the report, you really find that the condition in which we find the police service today is quite alarming. And there are certain things that have been recommended for prompt attention in the report. Governance and oversight, the member for St. Joseph mentioned that. Human resource management, specifically screening, recruitment and selection, training and development, monitoring and evaluation, discipline, promotion, needs analysis, and succession planning and organization culture, and the customer-centered approach to service. Now, all the information in this report deriving from the original report and finding itself in terms of interpretation by the JSC and therefore in some of the recommendations of the JSC tell us that the police service is not effectively led, it is not well managed, it is a human resource nightmare. And what we really are faced with in the police service is a largely dysfunctional organization. Now, when the member for St. Joseph spoke, he spoke about the member for Tewarie and myself as knowing a little bit about management. And without going into that and how much you know and stuff like that, generally when you have a dysfunctional organization, you have to determine what is fixable, right? The second thing, you have to determine what cannot be fixed. And you close that, you suppress that, you deal with that. Then you have to decide whether transformation and rejuvenation is possible and how. And therefore, what can be strengthened to make this transformation and rejuvenation possible. And as you do that, you also have to reorient and reculturalize and incentivize and energize. And that is not an easy task in a dysfunctional organization that is really very hierarchical and tends to cultivate and evolve over time largely authoritarian systems. That is the nature of military systems. So when you talk, for instance, here about a police inspectorate, I wonder what the thing that might not be more effective should in fact be what you have in the US police systems, which is the internal audit function, where something is wrong in an organization and you have the capacity within the organization to move in and deal with the matter quickly. I don't know if what they sometimes call in the US an internal affairs division in the police service. So the question is whether that is not the thing that should be strengthened given the dysfunctionality. And if you ask the police inspectorate, which is being recommended here, which is meant to independently assess the service delivery, efficacy of the TTPS, promote good community police relations, encourage a human rights culture with the TTPS, promote accountability and transparency in the TTPS. I wonder if, given that the organization is dysfunctional and you do this, will it affect the state of play in the country? Is it going to address the issue of the escalation of murders and bring it down? Is it going to deal with the growth and intensity of power of the criminal gangs in the country and contain it and help to eradicate it? Will it deal with the assaults on the person in order to deal with attacks on property and the abuse of people in the system in order to commit robberies and other things like that? Will these things lead to the results that we require as citizens? Because that is what the member for St. Joseph avoided, and that is what the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's avoided, because at the end of the day, all the internal things you do in the service, all the attempts that you make to fix it, to transform it, to energize it, to incentivize it, at the end of the day, what you are really trying to do is to do these things in order to achieve certain results. And those results have to be the results that will make the society feel less fearful, more safe, and more secure as it conducts its business. And I think this is the issue for us in addressing the report. Not that some elements of the report are not worthwhile, not that the work that the original committee did, the Manpower Audit Committee, led by Professor Dave Saran, is not important and does not highlight important considerations. But the question is, were we to implement some of these things, and the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West said that implementation had already begun. Were we to implement these things, would we begin to see a reduction in the places where it matters? Crimes against the community, crimes against the citizen, crimes between and among gangsters, and murders that have continued to proliferate, as the report itself says, year after year after year. Now, one of the important things that this report deals with is that it wants to ensure in the report that the most suitable candidates are chosen in the recruitment process. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for a report to write this, isn't that a condemnation of the current system of recruitment? And doesn't that in part explain what the problem of dysfunctionality is in the existing service? It then goes on to talk about the routes that are possible with 5 O-levels, with university graduates, and then with professional recruits. Now, I just want to say something about this which is why I'm raising the issues in the way that I am. If you take well-recruited, effectively recruited 5 O-level graduates, all right, CXC graduates, and you train them properly as it's recommended here, and the dysfunctional system as exists now is not fixed, and you put these recruits in the system, and today, I think in one of the presentations here, it was mentioned that the younger policeman, I think it was a member for Laventille West, who had been in the police service for a short time, complained about the fact that the problems were really with the more senior and well-entrenched officers in the police system. So you take these young men, 5 O-levels, you well-train them and you put them in. What is going to happen to them over time in a dysfunctional system? And therefore, the issue here is not just to take recommendations, which might be good recommendations, and begin to fast-track them by putting a table which tells you, do this, do that, when to do it, how to do it, but to deal with the dysfunctionality of the system and address the issues so that when you make these kinds of recommendations and you effect them, it will make a difference. And when you go to the second route, the university graduate, they are also going to be put into the system at the level of constables, you know. So you're going to have 2 categories. They are going to be specially focused on special units, etc., but they are going in as constables. So you have 2 categories, 5 O-levels, you have university graduates going in as constables in that same dysfunctional system that I mentioned to you. Now, the professional recruits that I mentioned may have a chance to lead and to strengthen the specialist units which they are assigned. They may, in fact, be able to enter and be intermediaries of change, if you want to call that, because they may have, because they have special units, they may have smaller units within it, they may be able to do something. But I shudder to think of the other 2 groups going into the system, as dysfunctional as it is, and being to make a difference at the end of the day, both to the quality of the police service and secondly to the results that we expect from the police service. Now, the issue of promotion has also come up as an issue here. And it is a problem that is heavily complained about. The member for Laventille West made that point in his presentation. Now, there was, in fact, interviews for police promotion on August the 8th of this year. I'm bringing it and making it very contemporary. And I'm reading here, Mr. Chairman, from a publication that we do in my own constituency. I've done 6 of these now, 2 each year. And this deals with the issue of that particular problem of promotion. I quote from it. There are only 7 people in the police service who qualified to do the assistant commissioner's exam. There are 11 ranking officers who now function at senior superintendent level. Many of these are acting. There are 35 superintendent posts. 45 people will sit an exam for that, for the 35 posts, on August 8th. and then go for oral assessment. Some will make it, some will not. Some who are acting will be confirmed. Others will go down to inspector. Some superintendents will become senior in rank. The promoted and confirmed will be energetic. The demoted may well lose enthusiasm. All of these things have implications at the career level. An inspector at 55 must retire. Above inspector, you can retire at 60. When the assessments and promotions are over, 180 people will be in line for exit at the age of 55. And the issue of how promotions are done is also important, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because, as you know, the system in the police changed so that police officers can move up on the basis of examinations and on the basis of acquired qualifications. But one of the things that is mentioned in this particular report is the fact that the police are supposed to make cases. They are supposed to charge people for crimes. And they are supposed to manage this matter in the courthouse. So if the amount of matters you have before the court and the amount of matters you win before the court and the amount of investigations that you are involved in are not critical to the process of promotion, why would you bother with these things if education and qualifications are more important and passing the exam is more important than the work of policing? So the issue of balancing the educational requirements which need to be improved in the police service and the training that is necessary to ensure that these educated people can effectively do the police work are important considerations in this matter. The report talks about the alarming state in which you cannot find out how many policemen and women are on duty, that you do not know how many people are on sick leave. Do you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that if you are on sick leave, you can sit the exam to get a promotion? Do you know that if you are on leave, you can sit the exam to get a promotion? Do you know that if you are on some disciplinary charge, you can take the exam to get a promotion? So all of these dysfunctional elements of the police service have to be brought together and dealt with so that you can literally clean up the system in order to ensure that there is an adequate mixture of education and training in police work, bringing together better prepared and better educated people, but also people who are involved in police work, but who have the discipline and the disposition to do the work of policing, which is not an easy thing to do. There is a legend in this country in which there was a police commissioner, in which if you come for promotion with sick leave, and under our constitution, the police commissioner has the power to appoint and to dismiss. If you come for that promotion interview and you have spent a year and something on sick leave and you come to the interview, he would just ask you, legend has it, how you are today? You're well today? And if you say, yes, sir, I'm well today, you say, okay, go and make sure that you keep in good health. The interview is over. And if you came and you if you came and you had no cases before the court and you were involved in no investigations, that commissioner would simply ask you how many cases you have before the court. And if you said a low number or zero, he said, how many investigations are you on? And you say again, a low number or zero. That commissioner will simply tell you, well, okay, go ahead then and see if you could do some police work to take some matters before the court for the next time you come in here. So that the regime was established in a certain way in which you had to be performing police work, you had to be a high performance person, you had to be a person who attended to your duties in order to function in the police system. And one of the alarming statistics that comes out here, by the way, in addition to these things that I'm talking about, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that more people are leaving the police service than are being recruited annually by the police service. And that is here in this report. People, I'll get it for you. People are leaving the police force in larger numbers than, in fact, people are being recruited annually in the police force. 32, is it 32? Yeah, just for the record, I'll read it here. It's page 34 under manpower strength and utilization in the TTPS. The number of officers separating from the TTPS annually is greater than the number of intakes. The TTPS already has a shortfall of officers. The low recruitment of officers is further adding to the problem. The TTPS needs to acquire the necessary resources to recruit adequate officers. So it is an issue. And I want to say the member for Naparima made an important point this morning in talking about the statistics from Singapore and the other countries in which the ratio of the number of police to the population was smaller than Trinidad and Tobago, and it was more effective. They were more effective. So I am not big on recommendations here to expand the police force, you know. I am not big on that because you could go on a recruitment drive and recruit a lot of people and make no difference. The murder rates continue to go, the crime continue to increase. It doesn't make a difference. The question is, how do you deploy and manage these resources? What is the structure of the system? What is the objective of policing? It is not just to put the things that the mandate of the police force is to keep peace or whatever it is, and I know it's located in here, I can find it and read it, or to keep peace and order, or to deal with crime, or to provide safety and security. It is not that. The mandate has to be to deal with a situation that is going out of hand and bringing it under some measure of control. Now, having said that, I want to quote from one of the great economists that the Caribbean has produced, and that is Sir Arthur Lewis. He has one sentence in one of the pieces that he wrote which says that everything begins with the market. And it's an important statement, although short and crisp, because what it says is that whenever you are doing anything, in order to be successful, you have to work backwards from the market if you are to achieve success. You have to start with what the market is saying and doing and telling you, and work backwards in order to be successful. And the member for St. Joseph talked about, he talked about problem solving, but I'd rather say problem identification and solution finding. If you have to be able to identify the problem, and you have to find what that solution is. And we have to ask our question, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? And what are the many critical dimensions of that problem, Mr. Deputy Speaker? And what is the solution? What are the solutions? What does the police service need to do? And I want to identify, I am sure this is not...
Your initial speaking time has expired.
Yes.
You have an additional 15. You care to avail yourself?
I would like to, Mr. Deputy.
Proceed.
I'm sure that there are many others. I'm not trying to be comprehensive here, but I just want to mention maybe 7 or 8 things too that I feel that are important for the police service to address. The first thing that the police service has to address is the gangs and the hotspot areas of Trinidad and Tobago, to bring the gangs under control and to bring the hotspot to a situation where they can be transformed from being hotspots to domains of reasonable living for the people in the community who live there. The second thing is that the police has to focus on safe zones in Trinidad and Tobago. If you have a system in which you have known hotspots, you have criminal gangs that are roving all over the country, you have drugs, you have guns in proliferation, you have unsecured borders, you have the infiltration of migrants, you have a situation in which you have human trafficking. You do not know what the complexity of this situation involves. While you deal with the gangs and you deal with the hotspots, you must have safe zones. Wherever there are large concentrations of people, or likely to be large concentrations of people, there must be special strategies to keep those things under control, keep such areas under control, under peaceful control. 3, there must be logistical deployment for effective control of the society itself. That is to say, outside of the safe zones, outside of the hotspots, outside of the gang areas, for the rest of the society, there must be logistical deployment for effective control. By that I mean police stations, mobile police stations that are managing with a strategy, mobile patrols that are effective. You need to have technology properly deployed in and out of cars, in and out of police, connecting stations with the mobility. You need to have rapid response capability. You need to have backup if there's a crisis. You need to focus on the returning criminals from abroad. And you need to deal with the issue of white-collar crime, and something that the member for St. Joseph mentioned, the links between white-collar crime and police corruption, which is mentioned in this particular report, and police linkages with gangs, guns and drugs, and white-collar crime with what you might call blue-collar or gangster crime in the community. You have to have focus on these things. You must also focus on white-collar crime as an issue, and you have to focus on illegal migration and its implications. So it's not just problem identification in the context of what is wrong with the police, what is wrong with the police system, what is wrong with the police service. Yes, that is a problem, but it is problem identification for what do we need a police service for, and what problems do the police need to address to solve the problems of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And there has to be a connectivity with that. And you can draw that on a sheet of paper, and you can develop a strategy if you think it through properly. And that would then tell you what kind of organization you need, what are the linkages you need between mobile stations, between mobile patrols, between stations, between technology, and so on. What are the areas of concentration and what manner of deployment, in what quantities, with what kinds of skills that you need to deploy in the country. And my own assessment is that there is much more thinking to do here. You don't have to start from scratch. We have hundreds, we have, well, at least a dozen reports. So we don't have to start from scratch. A lot of things have been done already. But I want to say the problem identification has to do with the problems in the police service, yes, and they must be corrected. But the problems in the society, the problems of crime in the society need to be identified. And those problems need to, working backwards, taking Arthur Lewis's statement that everything begins with the market. You start with that market of crime. These crime projects that you need to design, and you work backwards from that. What do you need? What kind of organization do you need the police organization to be? And what kind of strategies do you need to deploy in collaboration with each other to get these things done? And I have not even begun to talk about Army and Navy and all of these kinds of things which need to be connected to it. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the report is important, and we need to address the thing. We need to address the elements of the report and the recommendation of the report. So, and the other question is, this is something that the government sometimes shies away from. Sometimes it takes it on, sometimes it shies away from it. But the question is, whose job is it to maintain law and order? You know, on page 12, the importance of policing, 2.7, the maintenance of law and order is an essential public service. Well, when you put it like that, I mean, it is nebulous who is in charge of it. Well, I want to say that the political directorate is the first element in charge of it, because they are elected. The political directorate is elected to govern, and the first law of governance is safety and security of the people and the state. The second element is the Commissioner of Police, and the Commissioner of Police, I want to say in Trinidad and Tobago, has a lot of power. He or she, whoever that person is, has constitutional power in Trinidad and Tobago of an immense kind. They can hire, fire, transfer, deploy at will. They have that power. They have disciplinary control from hiring to firing. The third thing is that are other people in charge of this? Are other people accountable for law and order? Yes. You cannot have law and order in this country without immigration, customs, the military playing a role as a military should, not an intrusive role in your society, but being, what can I say, being acknowledged as a source for public order in the society as required. Correct. And fourthly, the citizens. The citizens are very critical. One of the things that was done here is that this story, this report went back to policing in the city of Paris, and it went back to 1667. And then it went to policing in the United Kingdom, in the Metropolitan Police in London. And it talked about the basis on which policing in the British system was based on citizen consent. And it then went on to say that this had continued as a tradition in Canada New Zealand, where's the other country? Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and there was a fourth one that was mentioned, I don't recall now, and I can't find the page right now. But I would add, it also existed in Hong Kong and it existed in Singapore. And the reason or the context of that is that citizens agree, just as citizens agree to elect people to represent their interests in a parliamentary system or in a governance system, they also agree to give military power for the local context, for the local jurisdiction of the state to the police. And I want to say this distrust between police and the public, or this distrust of the public for the police, is a serious problem in Trinidad and Tobago, because it means that the police do not govern by consent. It means that they do not function by consent. And if they do not function by consent, enjoying the security of tenure from the consent of the people that they do their job in a certain way, then what it opens the door for is political interference. And I want to say that these matters cannot be dismissed as simple little things that can be solved by small recommendations one by one. There is deep dysfunctionality in the police service, and there is deep dysfunctionality in the body politic of Trinidad and Tobago. The institutional capabilities within the state of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, these matters need to be addressed in a systematic way, and they must be acknowledged. And these are the problems that should be part of the parliamentary discussion here. Because from the realistic assessment that I read out, remember I started by saying I thought that there was a realistic assessment of the condition of the police service, and I read from page 16. It goes on to say on page 17, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is very hierarchical, complex in nature, with 10 levels of ranks and 37 sections, division, branches, etc., and it goes on. And there is a section here in which one of the stakeholders who is reported in here, I cannot find the page now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, says that really what we need to do is to scrap the entire bad egg situation in the police service, because you can't do anything without doing that. And that it's only from there, if you are able to do that, that you will be able to do something with the police service to get it functional. But it's more than that. Because as I said, you cannot deal with that situation in the police service without dealing with customs, without dealing with immigration, without having a role for the military as a support system, without using the Navy, the Coast Guard in a certain way. And there are other things, which is that given where the crime has happened now in Trinidad and Tobago, where it has evolved to, where you have corruptibility at different levels, where you have big money involved, where you have guns involved, where you have drugs involved, where you have an entire pervasive infection of the society in Trinidad and Tobago. Given all of these things, I think that the seriousness with which the issue of reform of the police system has to be taken must be acknowledged. It cannot be done in this dysfunctional system, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by small recommendations that deal with human resources and that deal with tinkering with the existing system in that way. And having said that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will close at this point. Having said that, I want to say that I welcome the opportunity to make a few points. I commend the committee that did the original report under Professor Deosaran for pulling together all the information and making the recommendations. I commend the JSC for the work that it has done to bring this into Parliament, all my colleagues who sat on the committee. But I want to say that I am not sure if putting into place these recommendations are going to lead to the result that we are seeking, which is the control and diminishing of murders and crime in Trinidad and Tobago. Finally, I want to say there's one recommendation here which I do not support at all. And that recommendation is that one way of selecting the Commissioner of Police is by direct elections. And that recommendation, I want to say that I am totally against. You will turn the political system in this country upside down.